Tonight at 10, a BBC investigation tracks down the people smuggler who was behind a channel crossing that left a 7-year-old girl dead.
We know 100% that you are a smuggler, that you are responsible for the death of this 7-year-old.
Also on the programme, a Reform UK canvasser has been filmed by Channel 4 saying migrants crossing the channel should be used as target practice and used racist language about the Prime Minister. Joe Biden and Donald Trump arrive in Atlanta, Georgia, ahead of their first US presidential televised debate tonight.
The stakes are very high because this race is so tight. This could be the most significant moment of the campaign so far and set the tone for months to come.
A week from now, we'll have the general election exit poll, the first indication of how the UK has voted. Tonight, we'll look at what the polls so far suggest and why many are still being cautious about believing them.
And disappointment for England, thrashed by India in the T20 World Cup semi-final.
On BBC London, the South London hospitals under extra pressure as junior doctors strike during the aftermath of the cyber attack. We'll have the latest.
Good evening. In April, 5 people, including a 7-year-old girl called Sarah, died in the sea off northern France. She had suffocated beneath a crush of bodies inside an inflatable boat. The BBC's Andrew Harding was on the beach when it happened. Since then, he's been investigating Sarah's story and hunting for the people smugglers who organised her family's trip. That investigation has taken him from migrant camps around Calais to Belgium and beyond. But finally, he and his team did manage to track down and confront the man responsible for organising that small boat crossing. This is his story.
Excuse me, sir. Andrew Harding from BBC News.
We've come to Luxembourg to confront a man we've been chasing across Europe.
We know who you are. You're a smuggler.
No. He's responsible for putting hundreds of people in small boats heading from France to England. And responsible for one boat in particular. This one. We came across it back in April on a beach in northern France. Police battling with a group of smugglers. Chaos as people clambered onto the boat. We saw a girl here in a pink coat. She was one of 5 to die at the scene. Her name was Sarah, 7 years old, born in Belgium, raised in Sweden. A few days later, we found her father, Ahmed, an Iraqi man consumed by grief and also by guilt. But what of the smugglers? Multiple sources tell us the man paid to arrange Sarah's journey is still active and working from a distant city. So we've come now to Antwerp, a city in northern Belgium, to try and track down the smuggler, the man who organised the boat and who, to some extent, is responsible for Sarah's death. And so we set a trap. One of our team poses here as a migrant looking to cross the channel. Wearing a hidden camera, he goes to meet a middleman in Antwerp, someone who can put us in touch with the smuggler. And the plan works. We are now waiting for the smuggler to call us. He's just sent us a text message, so it could be any moment now. Finally, he does call. Believing he's talking to a potential client, he offers us seats on his next boat. So, the smuggler is still in business. But he's not in Belgium anymore. We now hear he may be on the run, that he's heading to Luxembourg, and we're in pursuit. We've received a photo and video suggesting he's hiding in some sort of camp. An online search directs us to this migrant reception centre in the city of Luxembourg. Our new plan is a stakeout.
We've been watching for 3 whole days now. Still no sign of him.
But by now we have more evidence. This photo of the smuggler and his passport. He's called Rebwa from Iraq. And then we catch this glimpse of him inside the camp, and a few hours later we're racing to catch him outside. That's my colleague ahead of me in black.
We know who you are, you're a smuggler.
No.
He insists we have the wrong man. I swear it, he says.
You're going to call him, just check that he's got the same number that we've been calling.
But then we call him on his mobile, the same number he used when he offered to smuggle us to England.
So he's answering the phone. We know that this is you, sir. We know 100% that you are a smuggler, that you are responsible for the death of this 7-year-old, that you put her on a boat, that you took money from her parents, that she and 4 other people died. That's you. We know this is our man. He's getting on a tram now. We're going to let him go. There's not much more we can do.
So he leaves. And while we don't follow him, we do inform the French authorities, who declined to comment. As for the family Sarah left behind, they're being housed temporarily in this tiny French village. Ahmed has claimed that hiring a smuggler was his only option. True or not, he now says he's learned a hard lesson. The smugglers only care about money, he says. I hope they'll be arrested and my daughter's death will not be in vain. But his other children have no access to school here and no idea what comes next.
What do you miss most?
To have like a normal life like everybody.
That's what you miss. Do you think you will have one soon? Where do you think?
In England.
I'm sorry.
But there's little chance of that right now. Her sister's body has been buried here in France, but this grieving family has no permission to settle anywhere in Europe. Instead, they wait in limbo while the smuggling industry thrives.
Well, Andrew Harding is with me now. It was clearly a difficult process, but you found that people smuggler. Why can't the French police do that?
They're trying. All they're telling us at the moment is that that investigation is ongoing. More generally, I would say, in their defence, the French, the Germans and other police forces are making successful arrests. They are breaking up some gangs. They are, for instance, stopping some inflatable boats, shipments reaching the coast to be used by the smugglers. But is it enough? Are enough resources being administered? That's an open question. What we found in our investigation is that these smuggling gangs are very spread out, very loose networks in multiple countries, often with a boss somewhere really hard to get to, like Iraq. And I think it's also worth pointing out that this is a demand-driven industry, that as long as you have thousands of families who seem ready, for whatever reason, to take the risk, to get into a small boat in their determination to reach Britain, you're going to have smugglers there to help supply that.
And what about Sarah's family? We saw them there in your film, totally in limbo.
Still in limbo. And I think this is where real complexity comes into this and shows quite how difficult it is to come up with simple solutions, because the fact is that their father, Ahmed, came here to Europe 15 years ago. It's taken 15 years for him to go through the asylum process and finally to be told, no, you have to leave, at which point he took this step in the small boat. In the meantime, in those 15 years, he got married. Life went on. He had 3 kids. He still has 2 of them. And, of course, the focus now, whatever you think about the parents, the choices they made and the risks they put their family in, you have 2 children grown up in Europe and they're in limbo.
Andrew Harding, thank you. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are about to go head-to-head tonight in their first televised debate ahead of the presidential election in November. It's being held unusually early this year. Neither candidate has been officially named as the nominee for their party. The debate also comes just 2 weeks before Mr. Trump is sentenced following his conviction for 34 counts of falsifying business records. Our North America editor Sarah Smith is at CNN's studios in Atlanta, Georgia. Sarah, why is this debate being held so early?
Well, it was in fact Joe Biden who challenged Donald Trump over social media to do it now. He wants to have this debate early because he wants to concentrate voters' minds on the choice in front of them, to show them that if they don't vote for him, they could get Donald Trump. And he hopes that contrast might be what could improve his poor poll ratings. But that entirely depends on how he performs tonight. Two old men whom the voters already know very well. Well enough to say they really don't like the choice they're being given. And each man now is hoping to make his opponent look even worse. The campaigns try to weaponise what they see as their opponent's greatest weakness. Social media is flooded with images of Joe Biden looking old and infirm, along with claims he's also mentally incompetent. Images unfairly taken out of context, complained the Biden campaign.
I think he should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson.
It was Doc Ronnie Jackson who gave him that cognitive test. Democrats love to disseminate Trump's verbal slips and more bizarre statements.
What I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted, I'll take electrocution every single time.
Stop me up. Stop me up, I'll never stop. The Rolling Stones don't stop. Currently touring America, they're also in their 80s, just about as old as the candidates. Their age has not withered fans' enthusiasm outside the gig in Philadelphia, but many are worried President Biden is too old for another term.
I think we just do need some new candidates, some young candidates.
Nobody talks about his policies or what he's doing. They just talk about the fact that he's walking around confused half the time. That's why they call him Sleepy Joe. Like he's too old.
But Donald Trump's only 4 years younger.
If you look at the two, there's no comparison. So Donald Trump may be as old, but he doesn't act as old, he doesn't act as feeble, it's just different, I think.
His agility is not a 27-year-old kid.
No, it's
He's
not.
Senior citizen, but he is smart, he knows what he's doing, he's experienced. I've got confidence in him so far.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies.
Democrats hoped a series of guilty verdicts against Donald Trump would repel voters. So far, it has not had a huge impact on the polls.
For some of the independents, it might make a little bit of a difference. Maybe just around the margins that matters, but it's a close race, so that margin might actually come to play come November.
What happens here tonight will be the most pivotal moment yet in this campaign and could define the race from now on. Now, Joe Biden has been preparing for this for days, with one of his teams standing in as Donald Trump in mock rehearsals. He's practicing what to say about policy, but also how to respond to any potential attacks from Donald Trump. Well, Mr. Trump has been rather boasting that he doesn't feel the need to do any rehearsing. But in recent days, what he has been doing is attacking the CNN anchors who are going to be moderating the debate tonight, saying they're biased against him. He's been accusing Joe Biden, with no evidence, of using performance-enhancing drugs to make him look a bit more energetic. And he's even been hinting that he might announce who his vice presidential candidate could be any day now, maybe even today. And all of that does tend to suggest he's maybe not quite as confident that it's going to all go his way tonight as he might like to have us believe.
Sounds like it's going to be fascinating. Sarah Smith, thank you. And you can watch the CNN presidential debate live here on BBC One, also on the iPlayer and BBC News. You will have to stay up late, though. The special coverage starts at 1 o'clock in the morning. A Channel 4 investigation filmed a canvasser for Reform UK, apparently saying that migrants crossing the channel should be used as target practice and using racist language about the Prime Minister. Nigel Farage has condemned the campaigners, some of whom also made these homophobic comments about a rainbow flag.
This is what I'm talking about. That is outrageous.
The car has a pride flag on its bonnet.
You see that degenerate flag on the front bonnet? What the old Bill doing promoting that crap? He's about catching nonsense, not promoting the
Well, our political correspondent Hannah Miller is in Westminster. Tell us more about what has been filmed for Channel 4.
Well, Nigel Farage first described those comments that you've just heard there as crass, but then when pushed did say that they could be described as homophobic. Tonight he said that none of those who've been filmed by Channel 4 News will be welcome to work on his campaign in Clacton in the future. But this isn't the first time that he's had to defend himself or respond to offensive comments that have been made by people associated with his party. I'm going to show you some comments that were broadcast by Channel 4 News, filmed by them, of a man identified as Andrew Parker, who appears to be a volunteer out canvassing. This is what he had to say about the Prime Minister.
I've always been a Tory voter. What annoys me is the he got in. What's good is he? You tell me, you know, he's just wet. What's in that? Useless. Yeah.
And Mr. Parker also made these comments about migrants coming across the channel.
And all the place near Dover, army recruitment, get the young recruits there, yeah, with guns on the beach, target practice, just show them.
Well, Nigel Farage has described those comments as very prejudiced and very wrong, and said that Mr. Parker will not be welcome to work on his campaign in the coming week. Andrew Parker said that he hadn't previously discussed his personal views with representatives from Reform UK and apologised if they have brought the party into disrepute. Nigel Farage has suggested already that comments such as this, as people hear about them, may have an impact on people's willingness to vote for his party. This is his 8th time trying to become an MP, and he certainly wants to distance himself from these kind of comments.
Hannah Miller, thank you. And I think we can actually hear from Nigel Farage now, because he has said he is sorry if anyone has been offended by the comments.
Look, a lot of what's being said is nonsense. A lot of it is just the way people talk, all right? Where I find people who are genuinely offensive, I deal with it.
Farage there. Now, could the election next week see a resurgent Liberal Democrat Party? Most opinion polls suggest that the Lib Dems could once again become the 3rd largest party in the House of Commons. They won just 11 seats in 2019, but their leader, Ed Davey, is hopeful that the party is finally turning a corner. Our political editor, Chris Mason, went to meet him on the campaign trail.
Marple Bridge in Greater Manchester. Hanging around is all part of the thing covering a general election. That is, unless you've arrived in the nick of time.
We'll just catch them up a bit.
Yeah, one sec. This bedraggled reporter in a creased suit finds himself on an impromptu hike, chasing the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Ed Davey has specialised in the wacky stunt on this campaign. He's brought us to the top of a hill for his next one.
Fancy seeing you here.
Today he's painting porcelain on a picnic table.
So we're painting.
These capers command attention. That is their strategy, a small party fighting to be heard. They'd like to rejoin the EU single market, give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote, and deliver free personal care and more GPs in England. Now reunited with his jacket and tie, I wanted on your behalf to ask Sir Ed what a party like his can actually achieve, given it won't win the election.
What's the best you can hope for the content in this manifesto? Is it that whoever is in government nicks the best bits?
Well, it's quite often that Liberal Democrat policies are stolen, but you'll get them stolen more often if you've got lots of Liberal Democrat MPs in Parliament arguing for them. I think in this election campaign, we're winning the argument about health and care, and I think with lots of Liberal Democrat MPs in Parliament after the next election, we'll win for those ideas in that manifesto.
Opinion polls suggest the Lib Dems could leap forward from a dozen or so MPs to 2, 3 or even 4 times that.
The Liberal Democrats under your leadership have been strongly anti-Conservative. How much of an effective opposition could you be to a Labour government?
I fought the Conservatives all my life. I think they're a terrible government. They have to go, get them out of office. That is absolutely right.
Can you be a strong opposition to a Labour government if that's what we end up with?
Well, we'll take those ideas to whoever's in power and campaign for them and push them and win for people.
Bouncing the polls coming.
If services to absurdity counted in this campaign, the Lib Dems would be heading for a landslide.
Whose idea was all the mucking about, the various stunts?
I don't take myself too seriously. I think people like politicians having a little self-deprecation, but we've got some very, very serious messages.
Did they get let off in the field? Or
No.
And the next stop for Sir Ed, Wem in Shropshire, to meet Pele the alpaca. Chris Mason, BBC News, on the campaign trail with the Liberal Democrats.
In Northern Ireland, representatives of the 5 largest political parties standing in the general election have taken part in a televised debate tonight. One of the main focuses was on health and the NHS. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page was watching.
Under the lights and behind the lecterns for the last big TV event of their campaign. Although this is an election to the UK Parliament, in Northern Ireland there's still a focus on what the parties are doing in the devolved assembly.
How do the parties justify voting to cut the health service budget by 184 million?
Westminster decides the overall budget for the government in Belfast, known as the Stormont Executive. But it's local politicians who decide how the money should be divided up and spent.
The most important thing, Tara, what has been achieved, there's a recognition from the British government the Stormont has been underfunded, and with the new Labour government coming into play, there's an onus now on all MPs and executive colleagues to make sure we get that better deal so we can invest in our health service and continue with transformation.
Hospital waiting times here are the longest in the UK by far, but the party which holds the health ministry says other parties are starving it of funds.
The Finance Minister has given a budget which doesn't take account of this year's pay rise for our hard-working staff. So we're already faced with the pressure, an upcoming pressure, with the pay rises for nurses, doctors and all of those staff on the agenda for change may not be met. And those are pressures that those people are facing in a cost of living crisis with all of the other pressures that people are facing at the moment.
We need real leadership, real resource, and then we need to take some tough decisions.
Two leaders who are competing directly in this Westminster election accused each other of not being sufficiently committed to the devolved government.
The reason I want to go to Westminster is because I believe we can tackle 2 things. The first is the financial challenge that we've just all talked about with respect to health, but also all our other public services. And the second is that trust deficit that the institutions will be there in future.
As a direct commitment to Stormont, we don't have our Deputy First Minister as a candidate, we don't have our Education Minister as a candidate, and we didn't have any ministers abandoning the pitch after 3 months.
The debate's finished in the last few minutes. 5 parties vying for votes across 18 constituencies in 7 days' time. Chris Page, BBC News, Belfast.
Now, in exactly 1 week's time, millions of votes will have been cast. The polls will have closed. We'll have had the exit poll by now. Who knows what it will say? But BBC Verify's Nick Eardley has been looking at the latest opinion polls.
Sophie, thanks a lot. Yes, this time next week we'll be poring over that exit poll. But before then, we do have a lot of opinion polls suggesting what voters might be thinking. Up on the screen here, you're going to see the BBC poll tracker. The dots on this are individual polls, the line is the average. And as you can see, this goes back to 2020. And for a lot of this initial period, the Conservatives in blue are ahead of Labour in red. There is a big change here. That's after the first reports of parties in Downing Street during the pandemic started to emerge. And you can see there's a big increase here, which is just after Liz Truss's mini-budget. But let's focus in on the picture over the election campaign. Now, a health warning. Many of the people standing for Parliament, senior politicians, are sceptical about these numbers. Polls can be wrong. But with that in mind, let's look at Labour. They've had a comfortable lead for some time, as you can see, about 20% up on the Conservatives, even with the dip that Labour have had since the start of the campaign. They're sitting at about 40%. There have been different predictions about what this gap could mean for a Labour majority, but the poll lead is consistent. The Conservatives have seen a fall in their support over the campaign too. The average at the end there, 20%, is now lower than it was after the mini-budget. And they'll be worried about the line just below there, Nigel Farage's Reform Party gathering support in these polls. Although, remember, the voting system means that this 16% doesn't necessarily mean a high number of seats. The Lib Dems are eyeing up a number of gains based on their support, 12% there. A lot of that concentrated, they think, in particular areas. And you can see the other yellow line there down the bottom, the SNP on 3%. But remember, that's Great Britain wide, so it doesn't really tell us what's going on in Scotland, where the polls suggest a lot of seats are up for grabs. Now, to emphasise, we cannot be certain that this is right. We are cautious about polls, so are the politicians. But a lot of people will be keeping an eye on these numbers until next Thursday, 10 p.m, when the exit poll is published, and then the results start to come through. Sophie.
Nick, thank you. The International Space Station has been orbiting the Earth with astronauts on board since 2001. It's huge, by far the largest single structure ever built in space, and it's being retired at the end of this decade. Now NASA has asked Elon Musk's SpaceX company to build a vessel that can push the space station back through Earth's atmosphere and safely into the Pacific Ocean. SpaceX has been awarded a contract worth more than $800 million to develop what's been called the US De-Orbit Vehicle. It'll push the space station into an area of the Pacific Ocean called Point Nemo, one of the most remote areas of the world, known as the graveyard of satellites and spaceships. Have a look now at these extraordinary pictures. CCTV caught the moment when a massive sinkhole appeared on a football pitch in the US town of Alton. It's 100 feet wide and could be just as deep. It's thought it was caused by a disused mine collapsing. Amazingly, no one was hurt, but a whole floodlight did disappear into that hole. England's cricketers are out of the T20 World Cup. They were thrashed by India by 68 runs in their semi-final in Guyana. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson was watching the action.
There was a rhythm to the cricket in Guyana. Whenever the rain stopped, Rohit Sharma started. India's captain, no one in the world bats better on the evidence of this World Cup. 57 runs from 39 balls. But when Rohit missed, Adil Rashid hit. India's other batters, with a full range of techniques, kept the big shots coming. It all added up to 171, which felt pretty good. Clear skies for England's chase. Confused intentions from Jos Buttler. Well, he didn't mean to hit it there. Caught and gone for 23. Phil Salt faced Jasprit Bumrah, whose face says it all. Don't look now. Harry Brook, 68 for 6. The last wickets fell in a humbling tumble of run-outs.
Chance of another run-out.
It was India's game long before the final LBW. England lost by 68 runs, in truth outclassed India to the final, where, in truth, they always imagined they'd be. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Time for a look at the weather now. Stav Denaeus is with us. Hello.
Hi there, Sophie. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. It was a bit cooler today across the board, but we saw a top temperature 25 degrees across the southeast, which was pretty decent. Less humidity, so it felt more comfortable. But tomorrow, it's sunshine and showers, quite breezy, courtesy of this area of low pressure, which is bringing wet and windy weather across the northern half of the UK through tonight. Some heavy rain at times across northern and western areas of Scotland. Blustery gales in places. Those showers also affecting northern and western parts of England and Wales, but largely dry across the southeast. We notice those temperatures a lot lower than last night, looking at 9 to 12 degrees, so a lot more comfortable for sleeping. Tomorrow then we start off, plenty of sunshine around, but it will stay breezy across the northern half of the country. Plenty of heavy showers rattling through, certainly northern Scotland. Staying dry, I think, from Wales, the Midlands southwards. Top temperature 22 or 23 degrees. That is a little bit cooler, lower humidity as well. So pretty decent, I think. I'm feeling good in the sunshine times. Now, this weekend is quite mixed, pretty solid, I think, with sunshine. It'll be fairly warm as well, but we have these weather fronts moving in from the west. That's going to bring thicker cloud on Saturday to parts of northern England, Wales, into the Midlands. Splashes of rain here. Breezy for the far north of Scotland. The rest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, we're doing pretty well with the sunshine. And southeast England, we'll see some warm and slightly humid weather moving up from the south. 25 degrees there. Otherwise, it's the mid to high teens. And then we see that weather front fizzle out on Sunday. Ridge of high pressure builds in. Fewer isobars around, so the winds will be lighter. And we should see some sunshine around. Through the day, I think on Sunday, a bit of cloud just tending to build up. I think most places staying dry thanks to that ridge of high pressure. Thickest of the cloud always across the north and the west of Scotland. But the temperature a little bit lower, particularly if the cloud builds up through the afternoon. Those temperatures 15 to 23 degrees. And then as we head into next week, it does look like we'll see low pressure always close by. That'll bring plenty of showers into northern and western parts of the country. Some of the showers could be quite heavy at times. And I think for Wimbledon, it's looking pretty decent to start the new week. The best of the sunshine will always be across more southern and eastern parts of the country. And temperature-wise, around the seasonal average, maybe a little bit below at times. Nights will be cooler and fresher for sleeping. And it doesn't look like there's any hot and sunny weather on the way like we've had recently. You'll have to stay tuned to the weather forecast for that. That's it from me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Steph, thank you very much. And that's it from us on the BBC News at 10. Newsnight is getting underway shortly on BBC Two with Kirsty Walk. They're going to be talking more about the US presidential election debate that is coming up. You can watch it here on BBC One from 1 o'clock in the morning. But right now on BBC One, it is time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Good night.